Long before MTV and the internet, hard rock and metal music reigned supreme in nightclubs, ballrooms, concert halls, and backyards throughout Los Angeles. The stalwarts responsible for this deafening madness were groundbreakers that set the blueprint and paved the way for the LA metal scene that would soon explode in the mid-80s. These modern-day trailblazers were truly the pioneers of Los Angeles hard rock and metal.
Go to any club. I mean, it didn't even have to be a Sunset Strip. Any club you would go in, rock club, there'd be a band and there'd be a lot of people. And the band would be getting paid.
There was no hip hop. There were no boy bands. There was no punk. There was nothing. It was rock and roll. That was the game. You either played rock and roll or you didn't play. So if you wanted to be a musician, you were playing rock and roll, and the competition was stiff. We got paid.
You know, it wasn't just, I'm going to go see a band. It's, I'm going to experience the freedom that rock and roll is. The freedom to drink, the freedom to fuck. You know, to get in for free, to be younger than I'm supposed to be and be at this club. That was the start. It was magical.
Things started happening so quickly. We were kind of standing back watching as it was going on. You know, it was one of those crazy things.
I've never ever in my entire life seen anything like that. Not even that closely resembling it.
I remember coming to school and everybody had goals. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. And what's your goal? And it's like, I don't have a fucking goal. I'm just in the moment listening to my music. I didn't have these long-term things about 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
Backyard parties were like a phenomenon back there. You never knew when one was gonna spring up, man. And sometimes thousands of kids would show up to a backyard party, man. I always remember at night, with the helicopter coming over, the helicopter shining the light down on everybody, man. Everybody scattered, flip off the cops, you know.
The women I'd see, the chicks, you know, that didn't look like the loose type. You gave them some blow and a couple of Quaaludes and cocktails, and all of a sudden, you know, it was game on in the bathroom with everybody.
It was wild, you know. I remember, chicks in skimpy outfits, all kinds of illicit, crazy shit going on, and drug use right in front of you. I remember people were chopping lines of cocaine on the tables.
We didn't worry about nothing. I mean, we just seemed like we had the world by the balls. And we did.
Before we delve in too deep, let's first trace back to the roots of the Sunset Strip rock scene of the mid-60s.
The scene then was a lot more disorganized than what you guys walked into. Because I remember seeing shows in gymnasiums, football fields, army barracks, backyards, parks, a lot of outdoor shows. It was different. But I think it set up a lot of the things that everybody else kind of walked into. You know, the Roxy was a theater in those days, didn't have that many shows. I mean, they had plays and musicals, and not a lot of rock shows until later.
I mean, at 16 in drama school, I was in a class with a guy called Mitch Mitchell, and Mitch Mitchell said, "I'm playing with this black dude. Would you like to come and see?" And I said, "Yeah." And it was, of course, Jimmy, you know, and Jimmy was playing, Hendrix was playing in front of 200 white girls screaming, you know, bodily fluids leaking all over the fucking club. And you know, I couldn't believe it.
By the time I got out here, that was just about, you know, the Doors and the Birds and all that, that was gone. But the scene out here was amazing.
I remember going through Laurel Canyon, you could hear Spirit literally every night. Yeah. Just practicing. You know, they played outdoors. You could just hear them practicing.
You could sense when you went to Hollywood that it was a different thing. People dressed differently. It felt like there was more money. It felt like there was more girls. It felt like there was more. Obviously, you were aware of the fact that you know, the Rainbow, you know, Ritchie Blackmore, Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin. I mean, you were aware of that.
But the Strip from, I would say, from Crescent Heights all the way down to Doheny was just packed with people. you know, you couldn't even walk. And the cops were constantly, you know, telling you to move on, move on.
Later, in the late 60s, when like bands like Yes and Mott the Hoople and Free and Traffic started coming over, all the English bands would go through, play the Whiskey. Every band, that was their first LA show. And the arc in those days was you wanted to be able to play the Whiskey, the Roxy, the Starwood, the Palladium, Santa Monica Civic, Long Beach, the Forum.
That LA scene around that time was really cool because you could go down. I mean, I seen the Doors, I seen, you know, because I'm going back to the 60s, but that whole scene, you know, in LA was the scene, you know, like San Francisco just before, you know, the Love-In scene, you know, but I went through that whole thing. I went through the Watts riots and that whole thing in LA.
When I first started going to Hollywood, before Smile or any of the bands or anything, 73, 74, around then, you could drive down the street and there'd be neon lights everywhere. Massage, you know, girls. I mean, it was like everywhere, man. And then they came in and cleaned all that up, right? The mayor coming in and putting his foot down, and just as that snuffed out, here come the rock and roll scene, man. And I mean, it was everywhere.
Music promoter David Forrest started out in San Francisco working for Bill Graham and managed Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham. Relocating in the mid-70s to Los Angeles, he promoted stadium concerts featuring such rock icons as Kiss and Alice Cooper. He then went on to book two of Hollywood's premier nightclubs, the Whiskey A Go-Go and the Starwood, which led to managing acts such as Quiet Riot, London, and Detective, a band led by former Silverhead vocalist Michael DeBar.
I went to work for Bill Graham in March of '69 and stopped booking all the little bands. I continued to manage the band with Stevie and Lindsey, but now I suddenly was handling the bands that Bill Graham was handling. He managed them, the Airplane, Santana, It's a Beautiful Day. There was a whole group of San Francisco bands that we represented. And I lasted about 6 months and then realized that San Francisco and the rock scene was wonderful, but that was not really showbiz. You got to go to Hollywood or you got to go to New York City. I was touted to sign a group called Detective, which was an act on Swan Song Records, featuring some very hot talent. For whatever reason, that hot talent, when they got together as a band, it was good, but it wasn't fantastic. It wasn't fabulous. It didn't all gel.
Swan Song is primarily, a vehicle for Led Zeppelin's tastes. We waited a year for Jimmy to produce the record band. Now, you give a young band like that, you know, a couple of $1 million, they are going to get fucked up. So that year was very indulgent. And by the time we got around to recording, you know, plus, you know, we spent $1 million on that album and recorded it twice. So it was disgusting. We represented the most disgusting part of rock and roll at that time. The most horrible, indulgent bullshit of spending 6 months on getting a fucking snare drum sound.
We were in the studio rehearsing at SIR, and Zeppelin were down the hall doing the Presents. You know, they were pre-production for Presidents. One night, one of the roadies came in, and they said, "Listen, he came up to me. He said, 'Listen, Jimmy wants to know if you want to come down and play.'" And I said, "What?" He said, "Well, John's not coming tonight because he's ill. He's sick, and they're bored, and they're sitting around the studio, and he wants to come. You want to come down and play with them?" And I said, "Yeah, okay, all right." And you can imagine how nervous I was to go in that room and start playing with Led Zeppelin. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I sat at those drums, and I played with them for hours in there. We played Wonton Song, Kashmir, I mean, a blues jam, tons of stuff, Led Zeppelin stuff. Right. But I tell people that story, and they look at me, because no one ever played with Zeppelin. Yeah. Never. I can tell you, the only person that ever sat at his kit and played with that band is his son when he was a little kid. He would do sound checks. That's it. So, you know, it was amazing.
The Hollywood glam scene of the late 70s was heavily influenced by the glitter imagery of British artists such as David Bowie, Sweet, Mott the Hoople, and T-Rex, combined with California fashion. Artists such as Quiet Riot in London helped catapult the LA glam scene that would reign supreme in the mid to late 80s. But it was the band Angel that arguably launched the first wave of the glam hair metal movement in Los Angeles.
We weren't going on stage at that time with ripped jeans or anything.
Right.
We wanted a whole stage show. We wanted a different, we did the music on the record, and when we played live, we wanted it to be a presentation, a show, something that you could, enjoy, sit back and watch.
The whole thing about glam, for us anyway, was we did not characterize ourselves as that at all. You know, as far as we were concerned, we were just another dirty blues band, you know, a rock and roll band, and because we were somewhat cute and wore makeup, and we did that because the society and the culture that we lived within was very expressive. It was about sex, it was about experimentation, it was about Oscar Wilde, it was about Aubrey Beardsley, it was about Lord Byron, it was about, it was almost as if one felt like a romantic poet with a slide guitar. You know? It was like, it wasn't the Sweet. By the way, I love the Sweet, and I love anybody that goes that far. But the reaches, what we were reaching for was something more sort of William Blake than Gary Glitter.
But it wasn't like it wasn't this sort of glam that became what we all know as glam from the late 80s. It was 70s glams left over from Ziggy Stardust and that kind of thing, and British influence, you know. But LA was doing it.
The scene back then was just, there was just so much music going on. And again, people underestimate the power of the 70s influence. It was like, there was only about 2-3 years of bands like the New York Dolls and Bowie doing Ziggy Stardust and all that. That was really influencing the whole scene. Everybody wanted to be a part of this glitter kind of glam thing.
There was a party in Bel Air, and about 300 pink tables on a lawn. We take a limo, it's a valet, People magazine there, Us magazine there. I'm telling you, I met James Coburn. He was the coolest dude there. But Baryshnikov was there, Barbara Streisand, Dustin Hoffman. I mean, it was one of those, Robert Culp, Ed McMahon. I mean, just anybody, that whole Hollywood elite. Well, Eisel came out. We had a keyboard player on the roof. We had these huge PA stacks, and they had us called as the disco band, right? Nobody saw us get out of the limo. We showed up. I'm in white spandex and a cape with a big eyeball on the back of it, Eisel on it. And we come out and do one song, and they come up, and Red Buttons is wanting to pay us to quit. We had cleared all these tables out because they weren't ready for, you know what I mean?
Sid and Marty Krofft built, their company built the logo for us. We already had our logo. This was the first one, the A with the face.
Yeah.
So their company built us an 11-foot logo that used to rise and talk to the audience.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah.
I hear that. Yeah.
And one of the quotes the logo would say was, "I smell the aroma of the gods." Because back then there was a lot of that going around.
Legs Diamond was another great band that existed in the late 70s. So amazing. And they had some success because they had a major label deal at the time.
Well, I liked LA because of all the rock clubs seemed to be in one area, at least in Hollywood. In Detroit, you had to go to this city, that city, it was a little more spread out. And then, back to the Starwood, we had the Starwood, had the Whiskey, had Gazzarri's. Nobody really wanted to play there. I guess Van Halen played there a lot, though.
Apart from Angel and Detective, bands such as Legs Diamond and San Francisco's Yesterday and Today, who were staples in the LA club circuit, became two of California's early signings to a major label. But it wasn't until a year or two later that the scene dramatically changed forever, when a 4-piece former cover band from Pasadena took the LA scene by storm. And soon after inking a deal with Warner Brothers Records, they changed the face of music history.
A guitar player friend who had come to all these shows a couple of years in a row, and then he goes, "Hey Dave, you've got to hear this guy. There's this new guitar player, this new band. His name's Eddie Van Halen." And he brought his little cassette deck, and he's playing live stuff that they had played at a local club, And I go, "Yeah, man, that sounds amazing." Sure enough, a couple months later, they ended up opening 3 shows for us in Southern California. Wow. And I remember Eddie talking outside the Starwood after a weekend of playing with us and going, "Oh my God, when are we ever going to get a record deal? Oh man." And of course, it was a year later and they got a record deal, and They just went from like 0 to 10,
The biggest thing that Van Halen did was Van Halen introduced originals. All of a sudden they were doing some original songs. Of course, all of their cover songs sounded like originals because they always did their own rendition of everything. I remember seeing shows where before Eddie hammered on, he just played straight, and they did more covers, and he would just everybody knew he was just as talented as anybody ever could play the guitar. Everybody could just see that.
At a very young age, 12 years old, even right in there, we used to ride our bikes over and watch these guys play like backyard parties and stuff. We didn't even have the $2. I got old Van Halen flyers at my house I should have brought for you.
I'd never seen the double-handed on a neck, and I just stood there and just going, what the hell? What is this? You can't do that. It's not. You're breaking the rules. You have to play with a pick. We have rules in this business.
Right.
Use a guitar pick. You can't be tapping with 8 fingers. That's cheating. You're only allowed to use 4 fingers. He's using 8.
Yeah.
And then I remember that was kind of like, it's over for me. As far as me as a guitar player, it's over. I gotta concentrate on singing.
Of the groups of that era in the local scene, there were a lot of good bands, and then there was Van Halen. Right. I mean, in my life, I've been 2 times been in the presence of young bands where it was like, well, that's obvious. This is a big band. I grew up with the guys in Lynyrd Skynyrd, so I had seen Lynyrd Skynyrd played in bands, drank the same whiskey, screwed the same girls, as Lynyrd Skynyrd, played the same dates, the whole thing. But it was always obvious that Lynyrd Skynyrd was going somewhere. And then there was the rest of us in the Atlanta scene. And it was the same with Van Halen. There was a bunch of good bands, and then there was this thing called Van Halen that was absolutely undeniable. Right. They were that good. And that determined, viciously determined. There was not a question in their mind where they were headed. Right. So, and that was an amazing thing to watch.
The story of Van Halen is through the boys, because that's who Gene Simmons actually saw and grew fond of. I don't know if they were still the boys or if they were Exciter then. Gene Simmons saw them and got Paul Stanley to come back with him to see them again. And actually, Van Halen was opening for him that night, and they ended up, taking favor to Van Halen, and that's the whole story. Is that Gene Simmons was a George Lynch fan before he was a Van Halen fan.
And then Gene and Paul got the idea that why don't we just get this Eddie kid and switch him out and get rid of Ace, because I guess they were having problems with Ace already at that point. And Dave said there was no way I was going to let that band steal my guitar player. So he showed up to make sure no monkey business was going on.
One time when Orange played the Starwood, and we were sitting there all ready to go on stage, and we're all pumped, and this guy walks into the dressing room. Oh my God, that's Richie Blackmore. Richie Blackmore walks in. He goes, "Hey guys, how you doing? Listen, just want to come by and say have a good set." And we're going, oh my God. It was like Wayne's World, right? Where you feel like, we're not worthy. We're freaking out. It's Richie Blackmore right there in front of us. It's 1977 or whatever it was. So we go on, and we're playing. We know Richie Blackmore's out there, so we're freaking wailing. Probably the song's a little bit faster, who knows. So we get back into the dressing room after this show. I go find Richie. Now, the band, back then, we used to get free drinks. Sorry. So I went, got Richie a drink. So we're talking just straight ahead like this. So I'm talking to him, and the whole time I'm talking to Richie, he's looking right at me, we're talking. You can hear the roadies for Van Halen setting up their equipment, tuning up their stuff and everything in the crowd. Then all of a sudden, we're talking, the lights go down, the crowd starts to cheer, and Richie says, "Excuse me," and turns and looks right at the stage and watches Eddie Van Halen the whole set. Doesn't look away, looks right at him.
All our club stuff was back
in
east.
DC. Okay.
Once we got to LA, we worked on the record deal. Once we got the record deal, then we started touring.
Right.
So we went, once we moved to LA, it was, we were done playing the club. But there was a lot of good stuff was going on. But it was just starting to kind of like, rumblings. It was starting to ferment underneath, it was starting to become viable out there, LA is a tricky kind of thing, it's not like it is back east. Back east was more, you're working the clubs, you're working your band, you're getting it together back there and playing it and working out all the kinks. Once you're in LA, it's a little bit more, all eyes are on you there, so it's kind of it's a little bit different there in LA.
When I was young, man, Angel around here, it was like the nice Kiss. You had Kiss, and were you into Kiss or into Angel? It's like, oh my God, I'm into Kiss, man. No, you got to be an Angel. But I met these cats, Punky Meadows and Greg, and to just be honest with you, Greg was my mentor that brought me into the music business here in LA.
Kiss was the black dressed band from New York, and Angel was this cool band from LA dressed in all white, and they're both on Casablanca Records, but that was probably kind of the beginning of kind of this dichotomy of West Coast, East Coast. And I think the band that really broke it open for me was Van Halen. When that first Van Halen record came out, that was a game changer. But Van Halen all of a sudden became almost like the Led Zeppelin of my generation, as far as enormity, cool factor, great playing, iconic lead singer. And once they hit, and that record just never left my turntable. And all of a sudden, my whole focus shifted to California.
Kiss were never my favorite band, to be honest, but they were really nice to us. They were great to us, and we did a lot of dates with them.
Right.
We also played a couple of dates with AC/DC on that tour.
Oh, wow.
And they opened for us.
Wow.
That's how young they were.
Yeah.
And this funny story is that I'd never heard of AC/DC. And we played somewhere in Cleveland or somewhere. They came out there to do a sound check. And Angus already had the shorts on, that outfit. And I thought, wait a minute, man, what is that? But I got to tell you, they started playing. It was like one of those things you just go, I don't want to play tonight. I don't even want to go on stage. They were so rocking. It was unbelievably good.
Believe it or not, we played a party, and then our first shows were opening for Kiss.
Holy cow. Wow.
Yeah, because before we signed with Toby Etner, Gene Simmons, we had met Gene Simmons, and he was coming out to our rehearsals.
No
and he
kidding.
wanted to manage us. And then we got Toby Etner. He was a little disappointed about that. But then he wanted to at least get us on his booking agency, ATI out of New York. And we ended up going with DMA out of Detroit. So that kind of severed our ties with Gene because he was trying to help us, and obviously we went somewhere else. But we ended up getting a huge amount of touring with Ted Nugent. Wow. And at the time, Nugent was really popular then, Stranglehold and Hey Baby and all that stuff.
And across from Starwood, there was a Pioneer Chicken place.
I remember that.
And they gave us a bucket of Pioneer Chicken after the show. And we walked out with it. I was going to take it home because we didn't have any food.
Right.
I kind of knew who John Belushi was, but I kind of didn't. He was sitting on the corner, and we started talking to him. I said, oh, this guy in Saturday Night Live, blah, blah, blah. And he was in Hollywood. I think this is shortly before he died. I don't know what year he died in, so I'd have to put the numbers together.
Yeah.
So we sat down, we started talking to him, and he was goofing around a little bit. And he says, oh, you got some chicken? I said, want some? He said, yeah, sure. And then, he went into John Belushi mode.
Right.
Instead of just taking the chicken, he took the thing and he just took the thigh and just went, he goes, oh, thanks. And spit the bone out. I went, wow.
The scene, I wasn't aware of a scene.
Really?
No.
But the Starwood and all these clubs, were you a part of that, or did you?
Yes, of
go to
course.
that?
We played 12 nights at the Starwood with Jimmy Page. And the underground of the stage of the Starwood was 50 pounds of Peruvian coke. See, our story is not about the rainbow. We didn't go to the Rainbow and get fucked up and do coke in the bathroom and strip girls upstairs. That's not what we were about. We were living in a mansion in Benedict Canyon. Why the fuck would we go to the Rainbow parking lot?
Right.
So I don't know too much about the Rainbow parking lot. I mean, I've been in the gutter of the Rainbow parking lot many times, as anybody will tell you. But in terms of like hanging out with other bands, I mean, like Kevin Cabral was a total, MDB fanatic. He recorded my songs. He, in his later life, God rest his soul, and tremendously, way more successful than Detective ever was.
Sure.
But in terms of being part of a scene, I don't recall having a scene. I remember my own scene, which was, as I said, isolated and corrupt.
The LA music scene was clearly a male-dominated arena, but there was one female band that broke through big. The Runaways were the first all-female hard rock band to rule the Sunset Strip and eventually reach international stardom.
When I first came down, the Runaways were doing their very first album, and it was very much up in the air about who was going to be the bass player. I was originally brought down. I think Kim Fowley had the idea of bringing me down and maybe having me do some keyboards on it, but ultimately having me be the bass player. And I said, I'm not I can barely play bass. I'm really a keyboard player. And he said, it doesn't make any difference because we got this guy named Nigel, and he stands behind the amps, and he'll be great. Don't even worry about it. But during that time period, it was when Cherie Currie, no one knew where she was. It just seemed like an extremely unstable situation, not to mention the fact that Kim Fowley, for all his endearing qualities, it was pretty rough to handle if you've never been around somebody like that.
My drum student, Sandy West, invited me to see her band, the Runaways, at the Whiskey one night. She said that she had this famous manager, Kim Fowley, and I went to see him, and they were a three-piece band, and very raw. It was Joan Jett, Kerry Chrome on bass, and Sandy, but they were good. It was raw. 1976. Definitely 76. If it wasn't 75, it was 76. Very early on. We saw one of their first shows at the. I think they were opening for the Tubes at the Golden West Ballroom, the legendary show the Tubes put on there, and the Runaways did really good. We attached ourselves to each other. The Runaways were supportive of our shows. We were supportive of theirs, but we also decided that we were going to crew up with them. So Kevin and I would be Sandy's drum tech. It was almost kind of like this protective thing. She's my student. I want to make sure she sounds good. But also it was nice hanging around that whole Hollywood thing that they had going. They were the hottest female band on the planet very quickly, and the first one to become internationally famous in a long, long time.
Every night we'd be blowing up pyro, we'd be dropping balloons from the ceiling, we had all kinds of wacky lighting, and that's what you did back then.
Right.
Did it help the music? No, but we could draw a crowd, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
That's why we had so many gigs, because we could, pack a club every night, no matter where.
You can go one night to Starwood and see Quiet Riot, but then the next night it would be Adolescence or some punk band or something, and the next night also going through Starwood, you have bands, coming through like Stars, Cheap Trick, Rush,
I saw AC/DC at the Starwood and the Whiskey, and I met Bon Scott.
I saw Priest at the Whiskey. I saw him at Starwood, Y&T.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden you have bands like Journey that hadn't really gotten their new singer. They hadn't gotten Steve yet. And they would play the Fleetwood because it was a 1,000-seater.
Right.
And had a flown PA, a way bigger stage, way bigger lights. It was a big club.
One time we went to the Starwood to see UFO. It was no heavy putting tour. And it's sold out.
Right.
So we go down there, and me and Bob Curran, a really great friend of mine, we climbed onto the roof of the Starwood, went in through a kitchen window, snuck backstage, opened up this door, and watched Michael Schenker play for about 15 minutes. Go, fuck, this guy's great. And then it turns out the whole band wasn't even allowed to watch him practice. There were two dudes, sitting there watching him the whole time. And he looked up and he was in dead shock because nobody's supposed to come in. We didn't know anybody, we just walked in. And he says, I prefer to practice alone. So we turned around and went, "You're great." We walked away. And then we got our passes slapped on us because they thought we were roadies. And so we went outside and we sold one of the tickets, and we got our buddy in. And then on the way home, the UFO roadie didn't have any cab fare, and I bought the tape from the show for $5.
Actually, I was jamming with Scott Gorham of Thin
Thin
Lizzy
Lizzy, wow.
and Bob Benberg from Supertramp.
Oh, yeah. They're cousins or something,
Well, they're
right?
brother-in-laws.
Brother-in-law, that's right.
Yeah, Bob married Scotty's sister.
That's right.
And we were jamming together in Glendale, California, and they lived in La Crescenta.
Right.
And Bob ended up going over to check out the scene in Britain. And then they went over there, and the next thing I know, I see Scott, and Thin Lizzy. I'm like, wow. And I'm like, I'm probably touring the United States, Ramada ends.
By the late 70s, punk rock had reared its ugly head in the LA club scene, and by 1980, punk and new wave became the dominant force in Los Angeles, posing a serious threat to rock and roll. Some say it crossed over, while others say it collided with the hard rock and glam scene. But there was one band in particular that had no problem sharing the bill with either Van Halen or the Weirdos. The Weasels were arguably the first crossover metal punk band of the late 70s. Released as an independent single in 1978, the intended tongue-in-cheek love song Beat Her With a Rake became an angst-ridden anthem on LA radio station KROQ and caused women's groups to rally around the station, threatening to break their records.
Now that you had your fun, honey, well, I had about all I could take. So I beat her with a rake and made a fatal mistake. Beat her with a rake and made a fatal mistake. Beat her with a rake and made a fatal mistake. Beat her with a rake and made a fatal mistake.
Mid-77, when we started playing at the Whiskey, this was Rodney Bingenheimer's, it was called the Punkorama. Up until that time, to play on the Strip, I believe you had to have a record contract. And Punkorama, that changed all that, because then you started seeing bands, from the street, like the Germs and the Dogs and the Dills and the Weirdos. All these bands were able to play at places on the Strip.
You see, what happened was, 2 or 3 years into the life of the band, something very magical happened, and that was called the Sex Pistols. In '77, I heard that record, and I could not believe how powerful and wonderful it was, and I went to see them at the San Francisco show. I flew up there from Los Angeles, and I saw it, and I knew the jig was up.
The late 70s was kind of a weird mixed time, because that's, disco was starting to fade out and punk was coming in. And then there was this whole resurgence of kind of like the glam rock thing that was going on.
The bands like The Sweet had a big influence on what was going on in Hollywood at the time. And they influenced a lot of bands like Nikki Sixx's prior band, London, for instance. And they were a popular band at that time, playing the Starwood. And that's where I first was exposed to Nikki and what he was doing and that sort of genre, There was another girl band called The Orchids that were pretty popular too. And, so it's kind of like post Runaways, post New York Dolls, but LA's version of it.
Because, you got the late 70s and 80, that was the punk scene in LA.
How did that cross over? Because a lot of the punk bands and the rock didn't.
Didn't at all. Didn't at all. The only band that both people liked was Ramones.
Right.
But nobody that liked metal liked the Circle Jerks or X or John Doe or anything. They didn't like that stuff.
Right.
They didn't think they could play. I was already a musical snob by that point. I was worshiping at the altar of Michael Schenker.
Right.
I didn't care about some guy who couldn't play 3 chords.
By 1977, summer of '77, I had reached the top I was going to be going in the music business, I think, and everything seemed to go downhill from there. And that's when I got involved in the local scene, which kind of makes sense. I mean, here I am promoting all these big stadiums and big arenas in the Western United States and all. And when that all ended, what did I have left to promote? Well, local bands. And I got a job at the Whiskey A Go-Go. But there were some bands that meant were meant for the whiskey, mainly the new wave type stuff. And yet the kids thrashed the place, and plus there was a bunch of hot rock and roll bands like, say, Quiet Riot, who could fill the place. But the people, the little girls that were booking it at that time, that wasn't hip. Wasn't hip. High-heeled shoes weren't hip. But I came in there and said, look, what's hip is to sell the place out every night of the week. But we weren't doing that, so I thought, let's have a combination. Let's have both the hard rock traditional sort of stuff, and let's have some of the new wave, and then let's be adventurous.
And then you also have new wave at that point. You can't really forget about new wave, because they were a big part of what LA was like. I mean, the Pretenders would play the Starwood, and so were the Plimsolls, and like a lot of these bands were out at that time, and it wasn't uncommon for someone like me to go see Yesterday and Today and then go see the Plimsolls. It was pretty common to it was what was in the scene at that time.
I remember one time I went to the Whiskey to buy tickets. And you buy like 2 or 3 tickets at a time or whatever for a couple different shows. And I went to buy tickets for Budgie and the Ramones. So not the same bill, but just 2 separate shows. And the girl looked at me like, are you nuts?
In those early days of LA, there was punk and there was rock, but it all kind of mixed together. There was no separation back then that kind of came later in the 80s. In the 80s, everything was really separate. You like this, you like that. These kind of bands play with these bands. These kind of bands play with that band. In the late 70s, everybody was playing with everybody. Van Halen could play with the Knack. They'd play with bands with skinny ties. You'd have Van Halen playing with the Weirdos. And Weirdos fans would come back and see Van Halen when they were playing with a la carte. So it was a whole different world back then.
We'd go to the Gazzarri's and walk down Doheny to the Troubadour, and then come back to Gazzarri's.
Yep. I'd walk down to the Whiskey. We play at Gazzarri's. I'd walk down to the Whiskey. There'd be like Dead Kennedys playing. Deborah Harry's getting out of a taxi cab, and I'm like, oh, what? This is such a weird.
Yeah.
Punks were scary.
Yeah, and there was like, it was new wave, metal, just all that punk, and just all this weird combination of music all at the same time, just trying to fight for whatever's going to be the next big thing.
The record companies and the press people were saying punk rock, and hard rock was not cool at the time. But we said, we don't give a shit. We want to play loud, we want to play fast, with double bass, everybody's going to do a solo. So when that was happening, there was a lot of animosity between the short-haired punk faction and the long-haired rock faction. And I love punk music. I was actually the original drummer in Fear. But when Lee Ving said to me, we're going to do gigs, these guys are going to be spitting on you, and it's going to be great, and I said, somebody spits on me, I'm probably going to have to light them up. And I don't mean with a bic either.
Like the punk clubs would just spring out of nowhere, anywhere. It's like old supermarket closed down, so what do? They kind of, some promoter goes in there, guts the walls, puts Godzillas on it, and brings the Damned and Social Distortion into play there.
If you were going to a hardcore show, you probably wouldn't want to go into the pit if you had long hair at that time. It might be frowned upon.
We were the kings and queens of the Starwood. I mean, it was a lot of fun because there was a lot of different kinds of music still coming through the doors at the Starwood. There was punk, pop, glitter, you name it, it was all happening. So on the same stage where Van Halen might play one night, you might have a total punk band like X or something playing too. And it was a really fun, musically intense era.
Played at the place in Orange County called the Cuckoo's Nest. It was just basically like a holding tank for crazy people. It was great. It was small. It was made out of cement. You couldn't hurt the place if you hit it with an airplane. I mean, and it was a perfect place for this kind of music. Well, I told Felice, I says, there's going to be guys that don't like you. They're going to start yelling, hey, hippie. Because they had a big skinhead scene there. And they'll say shit, but they're going to like you. And we played our show, and of course the stuff starts right off the bat. But about 2 songs into it, they go, this is for real.
I think the first time I ever saw Dead Kennedys was in a backyard somewhere in like Monrovia.
Oh, really?
Somewhere, yeah. And it was like crazy, people just mosh pits and stuff like that. And I said, you know what, man, this has a way different energy than this rock thing, and and it kind of sucked me in. So I'd start going to these places, and my parents really didn't like that I was going there, and there was craziness, and people were getting beat up and You know, it's just a bad scene.
We weren't afraid to play in front of different people. You know, if they don't like you, it couldn't be as bad as a punk rock show. If they don't like you, they spit on you, they throw everything that's not tied down at you, or physically get on the stage and assault you. But, you know, it can't be any worse than that, no matter what we do, because we'd seen some pretty horrible stuff at some of the punk rock shows. It really was talent night at the hospital for the criminally insane.
I remember we played there with Black Flag, and we played there with the Surf Punks. It was a bunch of weird bills, man, but it somehow seemed to coexist, you know. But, you know, I was a rocker, you know, and new wave to me was like evil medicine, you know. It was like this weird shit, you know. Although there was some real good music came out of it, you know, but it just never was my style.
It was exciting, you know. It was pretty wild. It was pre-diseases that could kill you, you know. So it was the heyday, let's put it that way. And the shows got bigger and bigger, and we graduated into the, you know, early days of the Starwood, still with Badman, the Whiskey, and the Roxy. But then punk did hit. You know, and the atmosphere changed quite a bit. We had the Dickies, the Blasters, the Plimsolls, X. That was kind of the LA thing going on in 1980, I think. Right. And the only two places you could play rock and roll was the Woodstock, which Joe and Johnny and the Schultz family put together, and Gazzarri's, because even then the Troubadour, the Starwood, and the Whiskey, they were kind of going alternative, new wave, punk, etc. for a couple of years. So it was like, you know, and going from hard rock metal to punk isn't just something you do. You either is or you ain't, you know what I mean? So you kind of got to wait it out.
Once we started the sound barrier thing, it was Bernie and I, and we started looking for musicians. And the thing was, at that time, I had just started listening to a lot of the different new wave bands too that I was really into at the time. So the first sound barrier had a lot of like new wave elements and like semi-punk elements too. You know, the first carnation of, yeah, way before Total Control. Like we were like almost like a new wave band. Safety pins and the whole, like, it's funny.
The New York scene, the CBGB's bands started branching, coming, doing the trek to the West Coast, the English bands.
And you were kind of smart at the time you formed Dokken and you went out to Germany. Was
Bailed.
That the reason why, or how did that?
Yeah, there's no point. You know, it's like I had long hair, we play in metal, you know, we're heavy, we're loud. Didn't like the new wave scene at all. Right. Did not like punk. I was never into punk. Didn't get it. You know, I still don't. People say, well, you know, can't you understand the beauty of, you know, the Ramones? I'm like, no, they're just bad. That's just my opinion, you know. Everybody has their opinion, but I just thought they're bad.
Right.
You know, and all those CBGB's bands, I just thought it was just nonsensical, heroin, rambling, angry, bad musician. Well, because I was into musicianship.
Right.
Okay, I understand their message. I understand what they were doing, but I didn't understand the whole. Everything was just so angry.
Right.
I thought music's like something you're supposed to go out and escape and listen to music and have a good time.
It was one of those transitional periods. We were still kind of all based in traditional 70s rock. I mean, people used to compare David Lee Roth to Jim Dandy from Black Oak, Arkansas.
Right.
These were the groups we were thinking of, and then all of a sudden this wave started coming in from England, the Sex Pistols and the Clash, and I mean a lot of great groups. And radio started picking it up, especially K-Rock. It had a big impact. It kind of hit the hard rock scene hard. And, you know, it's a stylistic thing. It's a stylistic shift.
Right.
People think, oh, this is the new cool thing. So punk rock, as you would call it, really started to dominate. And that's when my group, Wolfgang, decided, you know, we didn't get signed with Van Halen in the wave, and it wasn't even a wave, it was one group.
After doing a bunch of those gigs, like all over Madame Wong's and just all the whole like little new wave scene that was going on at that time, we decided that we needed to be a lot heavier.
There's other diehards, you know, the Dante Foxes, which turns into Great White pretty much, and, you know, Mickey Ratt, which turns into, and there was some diehard rockers that weren't going to, couldn't go punk because they weren't punks, they were rockers, right? But we had Bill Gazzari with the foxiest guys in the land, right? And the Woodstock. So that was enough, and a couple of hall parties to keep you going, and then your love of the music.
I was always kind of blown away by punk. I remember going to a punk show one time at the Whiskey, and I was standing kind of like near the front row when the band came out. And they came out and just all hell just broke loose. I remember all lights and sound loud. I was like going like this, and smoke. And I remember people in the front row were spitting on the guitar player, honking the biggest loogies on the guitar player, and he was just loving it. They're hanging all over his face, and he was just playing, and then he started spitting back at the crowd, and the crowd was just rubbing it in their face. I was going, oh, I better step back here. I remember I was ready to run out of the place. It was really nuts.
Unlike the grunge thing that happened in the 90s where it was like, throw out everything before us and only listen to us. It was like, this is cool, this is fresh, this is exciting, along with everything else that's happening.
Sure.
And so there was room for everybody.
Back in that time period, it was pretty sad. I mean, as far as booking club shows or anything, because no one wanted to know about hard rock. It was all things like the Knack, things like the Go-Go's, very sort of power pop music.
With Snow, did you ever play with punk and
I
new wave
think we
bands?
did, if I remember right. Yeah, I know all throughout my career, they've had a lot of shows with different types of bands together. I remember Quiet Riot playing with James Brown on the same bill, and I remember Snow probably played, with punk bands. They did that sometimes. Put different types of bands on the same bill. Kind of makes it interesting. It does. And it creates fights. The metalers against the punkers.
But I remember one night we were in the rehearsal studio. We were just hanging out, drinking, and playing some songs, and we heard of this band that was coming in to play from Ireland that nobody ever heard of before, and they're supposed to be really big, and they were called U2. So we went, let's go check them out, So we went over there, and there was nobody in the club. There was like 3 people, and we were 3 of them. Right. No, I mean literally there was probably 7 people in the building. I felt really bad. I mean, but I was listening. These guys are really good. They could really be something. You know what I mean? And next thing you know, boom, they were huge.
I think a la carte going the full makeup and the big hair was sort of a fuck you to punk rock. Like, you're taking rock down to this level. We'd like to take it up to this level. This is dirty. We'd like to make it more glamorous, more fun, And we're, my bass player has a mustache. Having eye makeup and a mustache has always been a little weird. I know, but we did it anyway.
By the late 70s, FM radio was becoming more and more formulated, and by 1980 it became very difficult for DJs to adapt a free-form style, apart from the occasional specialty show devoted to local unsigned talent.
The late 70s is really when all the formatting came in, and you had all the consultants taking over the stations, trying to pump the ratings up, play familiar music, play all the arena bands. I mean, you would hear the Styx, the Springsteen, the Supertramp, the Bob Seger, over and over and over again, and the Foreigner and, REO Speedwagon, those, all the big arena bands. But freeform radio had actually started going out about 1975.
It's album-oriented stuff and back to formulated stuff, the same songs, the same, like AM,
Right.
When we did our first 2 albums, FM was a departure from AM. They didn't play the same songs that everyone heard.
It was a lot less corporate than it became.
Right.
In those days, believe it or not, the stations had a lot of freedom in their playlist. They could kind of play what they wanted.
Right.
If some DJ liked Snow, for instance, they'd play Snow or Van Halen. Right. They had to play the regular stuff too. They had to play, the Deep Purple.
Right.
But they could play other stuff. Nowadays, it's very restricted. DJs can't really do that anymore. But back then, it was supportive and helped a lot of local groups.
I would love to say that the new wave of British heavy metal had a huge impact on it, but I think what really started the LA metal scene was a few years before that, was all the 70s, UFO, Judas Priest, Scorpions, even Kiss to that level. Because what we had here in LA was, and this is how I got turned on to all these bands as well, we had a radio station called K-West. And this is back in the days where FM radio kind of first started.
Yeah.
and they was kind of all renegade, and that's all they played. I mean, I first heard all of those bands in the late, like 76, 77, 78 on K-West. So all of the bands that were playing around that time, Van Halen, Exciter, the pre, Metallica, Ratt, Motley days.
Right.
All those bands were hugely influenced by that stuff.
Yeah, like I said, K-West would put on shows at the John Anson Ford Theater, just right there underneath the Hollywood Bowl. Great venue. They would put on all sorts of stuff, kind of more new and upcoming bands at the time, like Detective, Sparks, the Ronnie Montrose's Gamma.
Because not only do you have K-West, but you had KMUT, which was the big rock station. They played a lot of stuff. And then K-Rock, like you mentioned, even though they were so into the pop and new wave stuff, they started to jump on the bandwagon. The first time I heard Highway to Hell was on K-Rock.
The most significant rock club in Los Angeles in the late 70s was arguably the Starwood. Prior to that, Ronnie Bingenheimer's English Disco introduced early 70s British glitter rock to Los Angeles. The influence these two clubs in particular had on the LA hard rock and glam scene was unprecedented.
Well, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll is the perfect headline for the Starwood.
To me and Randy, Rodney's Club was just our version of what Disneyland should be like.
Right.
The Starwood was a lot different, but Rodney's was something that was very, very, very unique, particularly for LA.
Well, people who don't go back that far as the Starwood goes, they won't realize what an absolutely wonderful place that was. It had a big concert room with a really super nice stage. The stage had a real backstage area and with a nice stairway coming down, so you look very professional. And it had a VIP section up there, and it was always full of rock guys,
right.
So rock people, and it was just always a blast. I mean, I met Robert Plant behind backstage at one of our gigs.
Oh my God! If the walls could talk and the Starwood upstairs, oh my God, that mass debauchery going on up there, man. I mean, sex going on all over the place, drugs going on all over the place. It was a little bit of heaven.
The clientele that it attracted in those days was what made the club so unique. First of all, you walked in there, almost every chick was 13, possibly younger, dressed like they were 25, and lived like they were 25. Or just turned 21, probably would be better. Because they drank, they got wild, and they dressed so unbelievably sexy. It was painful. And this attracted all the rock bands that came to LA. It's like if you were in any kind of a rock band, you didn't see LA unless you went to Rodney's Club.
To quote Scotty Waller from Smile, Starwood was king. It was the best club, bar none, anywhere in LA.
We played the Starwood, we played the Troubadour, we played all of the clubs because we were in that circuit. So, and also Madame Wong's, man. Esther had a knack for being able to mix genres. Like I opened for like the Motels, I was on shows with the Busboys and all of this stuff that I wouldn't normally mix with, Psychedelic Furs. I remember the police pulling up at Wong's Chinatown in a U-Haul truck, man.
There was a section on the floor in the back where there was tables and chairs, and people would sit in this little section, but in front of it was literally a wrought iron fence, right? So I'm covered in sweat, and I got the microphone in my hand, and I go out and I grab this wrought iron, and sparks go boosh, and I'm caught up on the damn thing. Guy had knocked me off of it. Oh man, and the blue flame, you'd always get the blue flame at the Starwood. If you go to a microphone and you sing with another guy, if you got too close, your noses would do a blue flame, pooh, and it would pop you.
Yeah, there was a lot of crazy stuff going on in the 70s. Mm-hmm. It was that whole thing, if you see the movie Blow, with Johnny Depp, about, they say, if anybody's doing cocaine, 75% chance you got it from the cartel, right from the cartel. And it was coming out of Hermosa, Manhattan Beach. Right. And I knew people that were hooked up with all that nonsense. And it was. Coke was Coke then. I mean, that was the kind of cocaine you do a line, you could go to sleep.
Right.
But it was pretty prevalent in the scene in Hollywood. I mean, especially Starwood. It was that and lewds.
Yeah.
So that kind of started that thing. I think that started that whole decadence.
Being gay was like a situation there at the Starwood that was not frowned upon. There was no problem. I mean, you know, the fact that Gary was also gave it a little undercurrent. I'm sure you always knew that about the Starwood.
It was kind of seemed like the LA version of Studio 54. It wasn't disco, but it was like the rock and roll version where kind of anything went and it was kind of open.
Yeah,
party,
kind
sex,
of.
drugs,
Yeah,
a little bit.
It was. It definitely was. I mean, there's nothing like it now because even like with the Whiskey Open and all, there's no scene up there.
Right.
There's no scene at the Troubadour.
Man, the Starwood was good times. It was especially nice for me because I played there, so I had my run of the joint. And the Hot 100 Club was just, you know, everybody's trying to get up there. It was, it was debauchery. It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, man, at its finest. And I mean, it was great.
My favorite days were going to the Battle of the Bands, and when the country club opened up,
right,
and you could get 1,000 people in there, and touring bands started coming through, and they started to shooting videos there, and to me that was our club.
Right.
The Whiskey we borrowed from the Doors and Friend Love, and the Roxy was a theater, and Gazzari's was a claptrap.
What about the Starwood?
So that was my favorite club of them all, for a whole bunch of reasons. One was I didn't do any drugs, never have, not interested. I'm an athlete, and you could get every drug you needed there because it was basically owned by a mafia guy.
Right.
And the ticket taker could get you any drug you wanted. You could see the stage from the ticket window. And if you didn't like what was going on, they had a bar upstairs that was kind of like the Rainbow.
Right.
And I remember seeing Dr. Feelgood there, and Jagger and Richards and Townsend and Daltrey were up there. They wouldn't let anybody else up there. And the whoop-de-doos would hang out up there. And then there was like a disco thing up top where you could just go hang out with the girls if you hated the bands.
Right.
But we would go. And, you know, seeing Rush and Halford driving his Harley right straight off the street up onto the stage, and you know, and Sammy Hagar offering to fight anybody in the house.
It got to be, you know, one night at the Starwood. Then it was 2 nights, 2 shows a night, and then it was the whole weekend, you know, Friday through Sunday, and it was just it was great. I mean, it was a scene. The Starwood was especially, I think, integral to even nowadays musicians, because even now there are a bunch of musicians that maybe I hadn't met over my career, over the many years that I've been playing, that still come up to me and go, "Oh my God, you were such an inspiration. I saw you at the Starwood."
The Troubadours, like, to me, it always sucked hind tit, but they had great, you know, Elton John plays there, and it's still a prestigious club, but it's not the party club. The Starwood, you're standing up for the entire show, or you can leave that room and go into the disco. It's fabulous. Disco was hot back then, so you're all these great chicks in there, and you got rock stars trying to dance disco. It's funny. You got the hamburger room, you got the main bar, you got the upstairs looking down on the concert room. That's you have to have a pass to get up there, and then the backstage is this labyrinth of it was like one of those Escher prints that the rooms, they changed the walls in the room so you never knew where you were. It was always kind of disturbing being backstage. You knew something weird was going on back there. I can't really describe it, but the Starwood, because of that layout, because you were never stuck in a room like the Whiskey. You come in, you watch the band, you go back, you get an expensive drink, you watch the band, you get pounded. You know, I don't dig that. I mean, after you've been spoiled by the Starwood, it's like you know you have a girlfriend, but you got a chick in the disco. You got a chick on the concert floor. You got a chick backstage. You got one in the VIP, you know, and, you know, you could just, it was wonderful. And then, you know, there's areas of backstage where even your guests can't get, you know, like the offices where the safe was. You've heard about the safe at the Starwood? Oh, man.
It had this crazy energy like I haven't really felt since. Kind of, you know, this place just had, when you were in the place, it just had this vibe, this energy was in this place, and you could really feel it.
We started to, you know, pack in the Starwood, and then we got into the Whiskey, which is a big thing, and then the Troubadour, and we had big crowds, you know, because all the promotion, all the hype, and we had, you know, really, you know, great following. So at that time we didn't have to do pay to play or something. We were guaranteed to have between 300 and 700 people show up at any gig and stuff. So we were pretty much the kings of the strip.
Y&T, they were called Yesterday and Today then. I bought their album. This album, they're jumping through the air like this. They're
Right.
frozen,
I remember that
Yesterday and Today. And I had an 8-track in this 240Z.
Yeah.
And I just listened to it over and over and over and over like everybody did. I'm just obsessed with music.
Right.
And they said, that band from the Bay Area is coming playing at the Starwood. I was like, and I literally showed up about 6 o'clock in the evening and stood in line for 5 hours.
Wow.
I had to see Yesterday and Today.
Yeah.
And when I saw Meniketti and Phil, God rest his soul, loved him, and Leonard on drums with the super fast single kick foot, I just, my mouth was hanging open.
Right.
The first famous, I could say my first famous gig we ever did was Journey, Y&T, and Dokken.
We used to go see Yesterday and Today on the first record and Struck Down. Those two records were huge influences on us, and we were big fans of that stuff. When they played the Starwood, we'd go early, stand in line so that we could be front row.
My recollection is that it was probably around December of 1980. I'd heard they had 2 records out on a Japanese label, as Yesterday and Today, obviously later becoming Y&T. But they played a gig up at the Starwood. And I just remember it was like, at that time, the tennis thing was just not working out for me. And I stood in this club, and there was maybe 100 people there. It wasn't a lot. I mean, it wasn't like packed to the rafters or anything like that. But Yesterday and Today, they were up on stage and they were playing. And you know what they were doing? They were having a lot of fun. I could see that the vibe, they were digging it. They were doing what they wanted to do. It was just like a vibe. They were having fun. And I just remember going back, going like, I could do that. I could play music, even if it's just in a small little space. I could play music and have fun like those guys. It just looked appealing. It wasn't about, like I said, again, the 20 chicks waiting for them. It was just like they were having fun. It was like, it looked fun.
When you go out there, you give it your heart and soul, and that's how we always do it. Right. We've never stopped that for our entire career. And I think that's just something instinctive inside of you, when you just have the thing. And you have to also give the audience the impression that you are loving what you're doing, not that you're depressed and you want to go kill yourself after the set.
Outside of Hollywood, the San Gabriel Valley was a hotbed for hard rock and metal. Led by Van Halen, many other Pasadena area hard rock bands of the time, such as Stormer, Axis, Snow, Smile, Pretty Poison, and the Greg Leon Invasion, mastered the art of self-promotion, packing in local halls and backyard parties, fine-tuning their chops in their quest to conquer Hollywood.
There was this place in Monrovia called the Wood Sound, and that was a great place to see bands that maybe weren't national bands per se, but they were bands that were more kind of local from the area, Southern California and that kind of thing. But I saw some great bands there. Axis was a great band that we were huge fans of, and it was Vinny Appice on drums, Jay Davis on bass, who later on went to play with a bunch of people, but Rod Stewart being probably one of the bigger bands he played with for years, and Danny Johnson on guitar and singing, who came from Rick Derringer's band. And other bands were like Stormer, who had members who later went on to be in Stryper. Tim Gaines was the bass player in Stormer, and Smile, A La Carte, just a lot of bands would come through there.
Well, I joined Stormer in like 80 or 81. The band had so many different members. It originally started in, I think, 72. There's a band called Cookin', Steve Hall, Donnie Simmons, Jeremy Masson on bass, and went through various members and name changes over time. They became Stormer with Jimmy Bates, and Randy Jones was the singer at the time.
We'd be walking down the strip, Mark and I, or Don and I would drive in our old beat-up white truck we had, and we'd be putting our posters up on Santa Monica Boulevard. Dante Fox, the Troubadour, Friday night, blah, 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 blah.
you know, come see the greatest band in this entire universe or whatever it was. And then we'd look back in the rearview mirror and you see like 100 yards back, there's freaking Nicky Six with his posters covering up ours. So we'd drive around and we'd cover ours up over his, you know. By the time the game was done, they'd be like this thick posters.
We'd get a bunch of people in the back of pickups with staple guns, and we'd drive up and down Laurel Canyon and putting posters up everywhere, and our name was everywhere, get the name out, and we ended up, you know, getting pretty popular. Of course, back then, it was like a turning point. You were either wearing leather and studs, and you were like, you know, a badass, like, you know, like Judas Priest or Black Sabbath or something like that, or you were like dressing like a girl, and you were like the, you know, the New York Dolls.
A lot of that St. Gabriel Valley mindset early, you know, even like later metal bands like Armored Saint and Ratt would market themselves, and they'd do flyers, and they'd go to areas outside, and they'd go to the Forum and put their flyers on cars' windows. You know, that all came from the whole Van Halen way of thinking.
I wasn't particularly aware of the LA scene that much. It was maybe a little later.
Right.
Probably a year, you know, when I started hanging out with Hetfield and McGovney and Mustaine, that I started kind of understanding, you know, what was really going on up in, you know, in Hollywood with Motley Crue and Ratt and Steeler and Dante Fox and whatever all those bands were called, and where we kind of like, we went up there and I started realizing, whoa, we're really different.
When we first got here from Nashville, these are the guys from Nashville. Right. And all the local bands, whether it was DuBrow or Ratt or, you know, they were getting the top billing. We were the outsiders. We were the guys from out of town, and we got the last shot. We built a following in the outlying areas. Pasadena. We played in Pasadena, Orange County, all the outlying areas. And finally, and I remember, man, we're sitting here at the Whiskey A Go-Go. It took me 8 months of walking up that stairway every day with a promo kit. These guys are from out of town. They're not going to draw shit. Finally, Dee Dee, who booked the Whiskey, said, get this guy off my fucking back. Give him a fucking gig. Give him a midnight on a Monday. She gave us a midnight on Monday, and we packed the joint.
From the very start, we knew what we must do. We let the power come rush on through. Still not
The man solely responsible for breaking the color barrier in the LA rock scene was without question Sound Barrier. Being the first all-black hard rock metal band to conquer Hollywood, as well as the first to get a major recording deal, Sound Barrier took a no-holds-barred approach, playing alongside all the top rock bands of that era.
You know, man, when I look back on it, there's no real words for it, because my particular upbringing, you know, I grew up in Compton, born in Watts. So being around quote-unquote European white people, I had no big experience on that. You know, and sometimes what I did have experience wasn't quite good. So, but then after going to college and all that, you know, your mind opens, and I'm saying, hey, I'm ready to deal with anybody. I'm just a person. I get it, you know. So we just walked in there with an open mind about music. And we knew we were by ourselves, you know what I'm saying? And that was the thing, man. We were on the island, dude. We were by ourselves. It took some balls, and we had it. Okay, we had them, period. And it wasn't going to be about any conflict. It was just going to be about steady pace, do what we're going to do, period. Okay? And people would just look at us, man, like, I mean, from the day, we're talking sound check through gig. What are these guys doing here? You know, and like I told you before, oh, man, you could hear, oh, man, they playing Motown or something? I was like, and I hear it, and I go like, and we go like, did you hear that, man? Motown. And we picked the heaviest damn song we could to check on.
I was the black guy doing rock, hanging out with these guys, and you know, I don't think they used to hang out with a lot of black people, but you know, for me, it was about the music, man.
To me, I was just hearing it as as a chance to do something new musically. You know, not like, okay, 4-chord song where, you know, okay, I get it. No, hey, let's do a lick here, let's do some chord progression. We were like a new drawing board. Right. And we had no rules. We had no, you know, we didn't have to follow anybody. So we could create our own thing.
I figured, wow, he was doing that in the 60s, man, where if I think I got it bad, he really had it bad because people really, really shunned what he was doing. But I guess he was in that machine of power where they weren't going to let anything happen to him or anything, obviously, you know, but he managed to get around, you know what I mean, with no problems hardly that we heard of, that anybody's, like as far as racial problems, you know. So I figured, wow, if he can do that, let's just see what happens, you know. So for me, it was a thing of like just trying to see if we can impress people with our talent. And it wasn't necessarily at the time about the color of our skin, but we tried to at first just kind of come on the scene like, if you accept us, you know, we could show you that we think we could do this too, as opposed to like years later, like a band like Body Count or something that'll come out and like, hey, motherfuckers, we taking over, da 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 da. And I mean, we felt like that, but we were trying to do it like let the music do the talking.
We would get this from people. Man, from a white person, you guys are black. Why are you playing rock and roll? We get this from a black person. Man, you guys are black. Why are you playing rock and roll? And we go like, what's wrong with both of you? Blacks were involved in rock and roll. Why don't either one of you know that? It ended up being a really cool thing with musicians, man, because back behind the stage, all that race stuff, the thought was even gone. We had a community going then, you know, and it was and everybody pushed each other forward. I think we accomplished what we were trying to do as far as letting everybody know, hey man, it's not about your color when it comes to rocking out, dude. Your attitude is what it's about.
Despite Van Halen's debut album reaching platinum status and many bands packing in the clubs, sometimes selling out 3-night stints at the Whiskey and the Starwood, record labels seemed completely uninterested in hard rock music.
This was all sort of before the LA rock scene hit.
Right.
So, you know, record companies were just not that used to signing people, you know, just like that. Sure. It was like, okay, these guys are rockers, so what? You know, I mean, it just, we were just not the right style at that particular time for labels because they didn't see where to go with it.
The record companies weren't very enthused about some of those bands, especially the Starwood type bands.
Yeah. It used to be like in the 70s, it seemed like it was hard to get signed. You had to be something really special and unique. You had one bad company. You had one Led Zeppelin. You had one Santana. The list is endless. But it wasn't like the companies were going out there trying to find, you know, copies of their own bands. You know, they wanted, and they were taking their time, you know, and then all of a sudden it was just all about more. It wasn't about quality, it was about having the most you could possibly have.
The thing with labels, you didn't see A&R guys in that era, like they were kind of a mystery and they were more of executives than they were later when we were doing the 80s thing. And the way they thought in those days was if you can sell tickets, you can sell records. So they wouldn't even bother with local bands until they were already selling out 3 or 4 nights at some club, and then they might show up.
Everybody knew that it was a popular vibe. It was just a matter of the record industry sort of picking up on it, and Van Halen was responsible for that, no question about it. When they got the record deal and exploded, I think it completely surprised about 85% of the people in the music business. You know, there was a good 15% or so that already knew that this music was happening, but you know, the rest of them were just, you know, whoa, really? You know, oh, come on. You know, didn't you just go to a club any one particular night and see the scene and see how incredibly excited everybody was? You know, it's, you know, the record companies are usually the last to know. Right.
I do remember the Pasadena Civic, and we're getting thousands of kids out to see us. I mean, these places were packed. I mean, for a local act with no major record label support, we were doing something that was unheard of. And the record companies were too much, I mean, God bless the corporate mentality, but it's a follower mentality. Everybody wants to look out for their own ass. They don't want to go out there and take a chance. And I understand that because maybe they got wives and kids and things like that. But as far as the creative artists, we need people to take chances. So we need those type things. But Snow, we were pretty much the precursor to the bands that were doing things independently. We did our own record. We sold it independently. I don't know how many we were selling, probably not that many. It was probably a giveaway just to show that we could play and that we could produce product. But the kids were ready for us, and then it started to run out of steam.
There was labels checking us out, but I think because of that backlash of the new wave punk scene, probably had a lot to do with it. But I also think we weren't quite ready yet. We didn't have that right song yet. You know, it probably would have came a couple of years later.
Right.
Definitely would have, but maybe right then we weren't ready yet. But then I think the record companies couldn't ignore the success that bands like Motley Crue and, you know, we were having on the local club scene and also other bands, and they saw a future there, and obviously there was, you know.
So we were basically a cutting-edge band that were not compromising. If we would have kept going, who knows what it, but now we're back together, so that's the good thing. But back then, putting out your own record, like I said before, it was something substantial and something historic.
We're a testament to sticking it out there and, you know, keeping it together in the midst of any kind of adversity. And, you know, everybody should, you know, have that same kind of attitude. You know, you should be in music because you like playing it, not because you're going to get a record deal next week.
And so the saga continues as the pioneers of Los Angeles hard rock and metal forge on.
I said, man, I need to print that. I remember I just had a perm glue. And that's my fault. That's two I've ever made. People glues. And I bought it. Yeah, it was chicken.
Wow.
And that, I've been telling about my clothes, the scarf on my neck. That's probably 1977. I think we're playing with that band, but that was an old bass player, Barry. Yeah, that's the food with that stuff.
Right, but
You know, the items I know, the purple. See how like the purple is more sophisticated. I'm not quite going. They probably harder than sound it.
Oh no.
Together.
Oh my. Okay. I had my hammer wired exactly. Almost. Full of that secret.
I don't know if they did that version of Black Knight. East side of it. What was that single I had one down?
Driving hard.
Yeah. Sounded.
That's good.
Oh, yeah, I'm playing those babies.
So safe with it. If I live now, because he young and he's young, but he's still in the room. You can go.
Hollywood, the Sunset Strip.
I 'Cause he young and he's young, but he's still in the room. You can go.
Hollywood, the Sunset Strip.
'Cause he young and he's young, but he's still in the room. You can go. 'Cause he young and he's young, but he's still in the room. You can go. 'Cause he young and he's young, but he's still in the room. You can go. 'Cause he young and he's young, but he's still in the room. You can go. 'Cause he young and he's young, but he's still in the room. You can go. 'Cause he young and he's young, but he's still in the room. You can go. 'Cause he young and he's young, but he's still in the room. You can go. 'Cause he young and he's young, but he's still in the room. You can go. 'Cause he young and he's young, but he's still in the room. You can go. 'Cause he young and he's young, but he's still in the room. You can go. 'Cause he young and he's young, but he's still in the room. You can go. 'Cause he young and he's young, but he's still in
It's a complete joke. Well, that was the reason we did. It's Joe knew. I think we were trying to set it up, and working for this guy, and everyone said, "Oh, dude, this guy's nuts." He said, "He won't tell you anything that makes sense."